In the forgotten highlands of an ancient land, where mist curls like breath from the earth and silence carries the memory of prayers long unspoken, a single ritual was meant to keep the balance between the living and the dead. But when a desperate man dares to awaken what should have never been stirred, the veil between worlds begins to thin. The horrifying ritual, awakening of the spirits, is a tale of faith, decay, and redemption, where ashes remember, mountains breathe, and silence is the final language of the soul. Chapter 1: The Cursed Ritual. Gila by Nguyen Rua. The wind howled through the mountains that night, dragging the smell of rain and the faint sweetness of decaying incense. In the high valley of Pa Lung, mist gathered thickly, wrapping the trees and stilt houses in a shroud of silver. The villagers spoke little after dusk. They closed their doors, sealed their altars, and burned the last of their oil lamps before the wind could reach them. At the edge of the forest stood the shaman's hut, small, ancient, and blackened by smoke. Inside, Lam, the last spirit medium of the valley, sat cross-legged before an altar of stone. The candlelight flickered across his face, revealing eyes sunken from sleepless nights. He had been chosen to perform the rite of awakening, a ceremony whispered about for generations but never attempted in living memory. It was said to summon the ancestral guardian, a spirit older than the mountain itself, one who could bless the valley or destroy it. Outside, thunder rolled without lightning. The wind paused, as if holding its breath. Lam lit the final stick of incense, its smoke coiling upward like a serpent seeking the heavens. Greater than, may the blood remember its path, he murmured. May the earth receive its debt. He sliced a shallow cut across his palm, letting his blood drip into the bowl of ash and crushed bone before him. The mixture hissed softly. From deep within the valley came a sound like a sigh, low, ancient, and almost human. Lam hesitated. Every tale told him that this was the moment to stop, to let the spirit sleep. But hunger and fear had brought the village to its knees. Crops failed, children sickened, and the old people whispered that the land itself had turned away. He pressed his bloody hand to the altar. A tremor ran through the ground. The candles wavered. The carved eyes of the wooden effigy before him, an ancient woman with hair of twisted roots, seemed to glisten wetly. Then came the voice. Greater than, who wakes me? It was not heard with the ears but felt deep within the bones. A vibration that crawled beneath the skin. Lam's heart stuttered. Greater than, I am Lam of Pa Lung, he whispered. I seek your aid. The figure on the altar smiled, a slow, cracking smile that should have been impossible for wood. Greater than, aid? The voice said, dripping with amusement. You offer blood to call the earth. Do you know what the earth gives in return? The air thickened. The incense flame turned blue. Outside, dogs began to howl. Greater than, I offer myself, Lam said. Greater than, and I accept. The ground split open with a deafening crack. A gust of freezing wind roared through the hut, extinguishing every light. In the pitch dark, Lam felt something cold and wet coil around his wrist, neither smoke nor air, but something alive. He tried to pull away, but the touch slid up his arm, across his shoulder, and to his throat. Greater than, from this night forward, the voice whispered inside him, your breath is mine. The darkness pulsed once, then vanished. When dawn broke, the hut stood silent. On the altar, the effigy of the ancient woman was gone. Only a handprint of blood remained, burned deep into the stone. Down in the valley, the villagers awoke to find the wind blowing backward, toward the mountains instead of away. And from the forest came the faint, rhythmic sound of breathing. Chapter 2: The Whisper in the Ashes. Loi Ti Tham Trong Tro Tan. The valley of Pa Lung lay silent for 3 days after the night of the ritual. The wind no longer howled. The air hung still and heavy, as though the world itself were listening. Every dawn, the villagers woke to find a fine layer of ash on their roofs and skin, drifting down from the mountains like a pale snowfall. Lam did not leave his hut. His hands still trembled from what had taken root beneath his flesh. When he slept, he felt it stir, something that breathed with him, matching his pulse, whispering in a voice so low it sounded like wind trapped in stone. Greater than, do you hear them? It murmured. They are calling, from the earth, from beneath the roots. Each time, Lamb woke drenched in sweat. His blood felt colder than the morning air. The bowl of ash on the altar had darkened, its surface crawling with thin cracks that glowed faintly red in the dark. By the fourth night, he could no longer bear the stillness. He stepped outside. The forest was gray with fog. The path to the stream was buried beneath layers of fallen leaves turned to ash. Every step released a soft crunch, like walking over old bones. Somewhere in the distance, he heard a faint hum, slow, steady, and human. Following the sound, Lamb found Old Men, the widow who tended the ancestral shrine. She stood alone before the burned altar stone, her lips moving soundlessly. When she turned, her eyes reflected the dying glow of the brazier. "Greater than, you shouldn't be here," she whispered. "The ground remembers your blood." Lamb felt the air tighten around them. "Greater than, what do you mean?" "Greater than, it woke something older than the guardian," she said. "Older than the valley. Older than us all. The fire from your blood drew it out. Now it speaks through the ash." Lamb looked past her. The altar stone was cracked in two. From the fissure seeped a faint gray smoke that rose and twisted into the air. It moved with intent, coiling toward him. When it touched his hand, his pulse faltered, and he heard it again. "Greater than, Lamb." The whisper came from nowhere and everywhere. Soft as breath, cold as morning cloth. "Greater than, you offered yourself. Now we share the same breath." Lamb staggered back, clutching his chest. The ash on the ground stirred, swirling in small circles around his feet. Every circle grew, deeper and darker, as if the ground itself were breathing. Old Men crossed herself with trembling fingers. "Greater than, you must seal it again," she said. "Before the seventh night, when the ash turns red, the path to the dead will open." "Greater than, how?" Lamb asked. She shook her head. "Ask the mountain. It remembers the first fire." A gust of wind swept through, scattering the ashes and snuffing out the brazier's last ember. When Lamb opened his eyes again, Old Men was gone. Only her footprints remained, filling slowly with drifting ash until they vanished. He turned back toward his hut, but the path was no longer there. The fog had thickened into a wall, swallowing everything but the faint glow still leaking from his palm. "Greater than, Lamb." The whisper came again, closer this time, inside his ear, inside his breath. "Greater than, you called me. Let me in." He dropped to his knees, pressing his hands against the earth. The soil pulsed once beneath him, then fell silent. The smell of burned wood clung to his skin. And from somewhere deep underfoot came a single, quiet sigh, like the exhale of a sleeping god, long buried but not yet dead. Chapter 3: The Shadow Beneath the Mountain. Bong Doi Chan Nui. Lamb awoke before dawn to the sound of earth shifting. It was not thunder, nor the growl of an animal, but a slow grinding noise, like stones being dragged deep underground. The air in the hut was heavy and stale. The ash that had settled over everything the night before now moved in tiny spirals across the floor, stirred by no wind at all. He rose, clutching his chest where the faint warmth of his blood mark still pulsed. Each beat seemed slower than the last, as if the rhythm of his heart was no longer his own. When he stepped outside, the world felt drained of color. The valley below was drowned in mist. The trees stood like thin black bones reaching upward, and the stream that once sang beneath the rocks was silent. Lamb felt the weight of the mountain pressing on his skull, its silence more suffocating than any sound. He began to walk toward the foothills. The path had changed. Where there should have been soil and moss, there was now a thin crust of brittle glass. Each step cracked it softly, releasing the scent of burnt resin. At the base of the mountain stood the old stone altar, half buried in dirt and ivy. It was older than any shrine in Pa Lung, said to mark the spot where the first blood pact with the spirits was made. Now it leaned forward slightly, as though the mountain itself were trying to swallow it back. Lamb knelt. Beneath the altar, a dark hollow gaped open. Warm air rose from within, smelling faintly of sulfur and rot. "Greater than, you found it." The voice was soft, familiar. When he turned, Old Men was standing a few paces away, her shawl fluttering even though the air was still. "Greater than, I followed the whisper," Lamb said. "It led me here." She nodded. "The mountain remembers. This is where the first ritual began. They called it the pact of blood and breath. Once sealed, it cannot be broken, only repeated. Greater than, repeated? Greater than, each time the valley forgets its fear. Her gaze drifted to the altar. Do you see the shadow beneath it? Lamb leaned closer. The hollow wasn't empty. A thin film of darkness moved just beyond sight, pulsing like the reflection of water. But it was not water, it was alive, and watching. When he blinked, the shadow shifted, taking form. For a brief instant, he saw faces inside it, men, women, children, each with their mouths open in a silent scream. Then the shadow sank back, folding itself into the soil. Lamb staggered away. What is it? Greater than the dead of the first fire. Men said quietly, the souls that fed the mountain when the world was still young. They sleep until someone calls them by blood. Greater than, and I woke them. Greater than, you carried the key in your veins. She said, now they follow your breath. You must return it. The air quivered. From the hollow came a low hum. The same sound Lamb had heard in his dreams, a slow, pulsing rhythm, like the heartbeat of something vast beneath the ground. Greater than, how? He asked. Men stepped closer to the altar. You must offer back what was given, breath for breath, life for life. Before he could speak, the earth beneath their feet trembled. Cracks split the ground, radiating outward from the altar. Warm dust filled the air, tasting of iron. Greater than, it's waking, she whispered. Lamb reached for her hand, but she was already fading, her outline blurring into smoke. Greater than, find the seal. Her voice echoed faintly. The stone with the mark of 3 circles. Only then can you close the way. Her image vanished. The hum deepened into a roar. From the hollow beneath the altar, a wave of black mist surged out, coiling up the mountain path. Lamb stumbled back as the shadow unfurled into the shape of a great serpent made of ash and darkness, its eyes like twin coals. The creature rose, silent, immense, and leaned toward him. Its breath smelled of burned wood and old graves. When it spoke, the voice was not one but many, dozens of whispers layered together. Greater than, Lamb, blood of the keeper, open the gate. He ran. The ground buckled behind him. Trees split open as the shadow passed, leaving trails of smoldering ash. When Lamb reached the edge of the forest, he looked back once. The altar had collapsed. The mountain itself seemed to breathe. And from its base stretched a dark shape, long, winding, moving, a shadow that did not belong to the sun. Chapter 4: The Echo of the Ancestral Stone. Tiing von Kua Datu. The mountain no longer slept. It breathed. Every night the mist rose earlier, thickening until it swallowed the moon. From his hut, Lamb could see faint flickers of red pulsing along the ridges, as though veins of fire were winding through the stone. When he pressed his ear to the ground, he could hear the slow heartbeat of the earth, steady, deliberate, older than time. He had not seen old men again since the morning she vanished into smoke. Only her words remained, circling in his mind like moths trapped in a jar. Find the seal. The stone marked by 3 circles. Lamb searched the foothills for days. The ash had hardened into a gray crust, fragile as eggshells beneath his steps. He followed the streambed, now dry, to the clearing where the forest ended and the cliffs began. There, half buried among the roots of a dead banyan tree, he found it, the ancestral stone. It was massive, rough-edged, older than any carving he had ever seen. The 3 circles were there, faint but unmistakable, cut deep into the surface and filled with what looked like rust. When Lamb touched it, the rust felt warm, and a low hum vibrated through his fingertips. He knelt, brushing away the dust. The sound grew stronger, clearer, until it became a pattern, a pulse, a rhythm. Then came a whisper, deep within the stone itself. Greater than, you carry the mark, you woke the breath beneath. Lamb froze. The voice was neither male nor female, but the timbre of the earth itself, low, rough, full of dust and sorrow. Greater than, you seek to close what was opened, it said, but the seal is not of stone, it is of blood. Greater than, then what must I do? Lamb whispered. Greater than, return what was borrowed. A wind stirred though the forest was still. The banyan's dry roots shifted, releasing the smell of old soil and decay. For a moment, Lamb thought he heard faint chanting, voices overlapping, speaking in a language too ancient for meaning. They rose and fell like waves, until one voice broke through them all, cold and sharp. Greater than, you cannot silence what was born from silence. Lamb's vision blurred. The markings on the stone seemed to move, twisting together into a single spiral. The air thickened, pressing against his lungs. He stumbled back, dizzy, and fell to his knees. When he looked up again, the stone was glowing softly, the color of dying embers. In the light he saw shadows forming along the ground, figures kneeling in a circle around him. Their outlines wavered like reflections in water. Each shadow had its head bowed toward the stone. One of them raised its face. Lamb's breath caught. It was his teacher, Old Tong, the shaman who had first taught him the words of invocation. His eyes were hollow, his mouth a dark slit. Greater than, Lamb, the shadow said without sound. You have gone too far. Greater than, Master, Lamb whispered. Tell me how to seal it. The shadow lowered its head. Greater than, no man seals what the mountain breathes. You can only give it what it hungers for, life that still remembers the living. Greater than, then take mine, Lamb said. The shadows around him stirred, whispering without voices. The ground beneath the stone trembled, cracks spread outward, glowing red. The whisper from the stone returned, softer now, almost tender. Greater than, do you think death will end it? Every breath you give becomes mine. Lamb pressed both palms to the circles carved into the stone. His heartbeat echoed through it, a slow thud that answered the mountain's own. For a moment, both rhythms aligned, and the earth grew still. Then the hum stopped. The air grew heavy again, as if holding its breath. In that silence, Lamb heard something new, the faint sound of weeping. It came not from above or below, but from within the stone itself. He withdrew his hands. The glow faded. The carvings bled rust once more. The forest around him sighed, and the mist began to rise again. Lamb stood, unsteady, staring at the stone that had spoken. Greater than, if not me, he said quietly. Then who? No answer came, only the echo of his own words, drawn thin by the wind, folding back into the valley. Behind him, the mountain exhaled, and deep within its breath, something whispered, faint but certain. Greater than, soon. Chapter 5 The Call from the Red Ash. Loi Goi Tu Tro Du. The mist lingered for 3 days without lifting. The sun was a dim smear above the valley, casting no shadow, no warmth. Everything was the color of bone. Lamb wandered through it like a ghost who had forgotten the way home. His footprints sank into the layer of fine ash that now blanketed the earth. Beneath it, the ground felt warm, alive, pulsing faintly, as if the valley itself were breathing. Each night he returned to the ancestral stone, unable to stay away. The markings on its surface no longer glowed, yet when he closed his eyes, he could still feel its rhythm in his chest. It was the rhythm of something patient, ancient, and awake. That evening, as the last trace of daylight bled into the fog, the ash beneath his feet began to change. What had once been pale and cold now gleamed faintly red, as though lit from below. The color deepened with every heartbeat until the ground seemed to smolder. Then came the voice. Greater than, you called me once by blood. It said, now I call you by name. Lamb froze. The words were soft but unmistakable, curling through the air like smoke. They came not from any direction but from all around him, rising from the ash. From the roots, from the breath between his own words. He turned slowly, searching the mist. Nothing moved, yet he felt the presence pressing closer, folding the air inward. Greater than, who are you? He asked. Greater than, you know me. The voice replied, you felt me beneath your skin when you broke the first seal. The ground shifted. From the red ash, a shape began to form, a faint silhouette of a woman. Her hair trailing like threads of smoke, her body wavering as if made of breath. Her face was hidden, but Lamb could feel her gaze burning through the veil. Greater than, the keeper's blood runs thin. She murmured, you cannot hold me much longer. Lamb's heart pounded. The warmth beneath his feet turned to heat, then to pain. He knelt, pressing his palms to the earth. The pulse of the valley met the pulse of his hands, and for an instant they beat as one. Greater than, I only sought to protect them. He whispered, "To heal the land." Greater than, the land was never ill. The voice answered gently, "It only slept. You tore its dream apart." Ash lifted around him, swirling upward like a storm. Within its dance, Lamb saw faces again, villagers, strangers, perhaps ancestors, all flickering between joy and grief, as though caught between two lives. Their mouths opened soundlessly, exhaling streams of red dust that joined the air and vanished. The woman's form brightened, her outline pulsing with the same crimson hue as the earth. She raised one hand, pale and translucent, and pointed toward the heart of the valley. "Greater than, there," she said, "where the fire first touched the stone. That is where the breath returns." Then she was gone, scattered into the ash as though erased. Lamb remained kneeling, his fingers buried in the warm dust. The air smelled faintly of iron and rain. Somewhere far off, thunder rolled, a slow, hollow echo that seemed to come from beneath the mountain rather than above it. He looked toward the heart of the valley. Through the curtain of mist, a faint glow pulsed like a heartbeat, steady, waiting. Lamb rose. The whisper followed him as he walked, woven into the rhythm of his steps. "Greater than, blood remembers." Ash listens. The mountain breathes. Chapter 6: The Night of Living Ash. Dem Kua Trosong. That night, the valley did not sleep. The air was thick enough to drink, heavy with the smell of scorched soil and damp stone. The mist that had blanketed Pa Lung for weeks no longer drifted gently, it hung still, dense as cloth, pressing down from the sky until even breathing felt like wading through water. Lamb sat beside the ancestral stone, his back against its rough surface. The ground around him shimmered faintly, as if the ashes were breathing in rhythm with him. Every time he exhaled, the dust lifted a little. Every time he inhaled, it settled again. The night insects had stopped singing. The forest beyond the clearing was silent. Even the wind had withdrawn, leaving only the pulse of the mountain, the same deep, slow sound he had come to know, like the beating heart of something that never truly died. He reached down and scooped a handful of ash. It was warm, soft as silk, the color of old blood. When he opened his fingers, the ash did not fall. It clung to his skin, forming thin lines that crawled across his palm like veins. Lamb shuddered. He rubbed his hands against the stone, trying to wipe it away, but the lines remained, pulsing faintly beneath the skin. From somewhere deep within the earth came a low murmur, too deep to be wind, too steady to be thunder. The ground quivered beneath him, and the ash began to move. At first it was only a ripple, a shift, subtle as breath. Then the surface broke apart, rising into small mounds that trembled, collapsed, and rose again. They spread across the clearing like a tide rolling in slow motion. Lamb watched, frozen. The mounds grew taller, merging, forming shapes almost human. A shoulder, a head, a reaching hand made of soot and dust. They did not stand fully upright, they swayed, bending toward him as if drawn by the sound of his heartbeat. He could hear them now. Faint whispers woven through the silence. The words were fragmented, older than speech, but he understood their meaning. Greater than, warmth, breath, remember? The figures leaned closer. The nearest one's face was nothing but hollows, eyes, mouth, nose, all carved from smoke. When it opened its mouth, a thin stream of ash spilled out, drifting toward Lamb's face. He stumbled backward, choking, the air filled with dust that tasted of metal and incense. His vision blurred. Every breath drew the ash deeper into his lungs, and with it came the echo of other voices, hundreds, overlapping, whispering just beneath the threshold of hearing. Greater than, we never left, you carry us, we live. Lamb fell to his knees, gasping. The ground pulsed beneath him, warm now, almost fevered. Through the haze he saw the ancestral stone begin to glow again, its carvings flaring a dull crimson. The light cast shadows across the clearing, but the shadows did not match the forms that made them. They moved on their own, slow, deliberate, circling him. The human-shaped figures began to crumble, but as they fell, their ashes crept across the soil, crawling toward Lamb like a swarm of insects. He tried to brush them away, but they clung to his arms, his chest, his face, merging with his skin, vanishing beneath it. He screamed, but no sound came out. The ash had entered his mouth, his ears, his eyes. The world went dim, muffled. Then, silence. When he opened his eyes again, the clearing was still. The ash lay flat and cold once more. The red glow of the stone had faded, leaving only faint trails of heat in the air. Lamb sat motionless, his breath shallow. His hands were clean, but under the skin, something new pulsed faintly, slow, warm, rhythmic. He rose unsteadily. The mist had thinned, revealing the dark outline of the mountain above him. From its peak came a soft, steady sound, impossible to mistake. The sound of breathing, slow, deep, alive. Lamb looked down at his palms. The faint veins of ash beneath his skin glowed once, then stilled. He knew then that the valley's silence was no longer empty. It was listening. Chapter 7. The man returned from the abyss. Noi ve tu vuch sao. When Lamb opened his eyes, the world had changed. The mist was gone. The air was raw and wet, filled with the scent of stone and salt. He lay on the ground near the riverbed. Though the river itself had vanished, nothing remained but a wide scar of cracked mud that steamed faintly in the pale dawn light. His body ached as though every bone had been turned inside out. He lifted his hand and stared. The veins beneath his skin had darkened, threading upward from his wrist like burnt roots. When he flexed his fingers, the skin moved a fraction too slowly, as if something beneath it were watching, waiting. He pressed his ear to the ground. There was a sound there, soft, rhythmic, like breathing, but deeper, older. The earth exhaled, and the soil beneath his cheek pulsed once, warm. Lamb sat up. The valley was empty. The huts, the paths, even the stilted bridge that crossed the stream, all were gone. The land itself had sunk, folded inward. He was standing in the ribcage of the mountain. He began to walk. Each step sank into the damp earth with a quiet hiss, leaving behind prints that filled instantly with thin streams of ash. When he reached the base of the cliffs, he saw smoke rising from the rocks, not black, but red, like blood-made vapor. The ancestral stone was half buried, still glowing faintly. He placed his palm against it. The surface pulsed once beneath his touch, and a wave of warmth spread through his arm, up his shoulder, settling behind his eyes. Then came the whisper. Greater than, you have come back, keeper. Lamb's breath caught. The voice was not outside, it was inside his bones. Greater than, you crossed the silence. You took the ash into your flesh. Now you belong to the breath beneath. Greater than, I came to seal it. He said aloud. His voice sounded strange, hollow, like two voices speaking slightly out of time. Greater than, the seal is within you now. The voice replied. You are the door. Lamb staggered back, clutching his chest. He could feel it, the heartbeat that wasn't his own, heavy and slow, echoing beneath his ribs. His own pulse had merged with it. The two rhythms tangled. He dropped to his knees, gasping. The ground responded, trembling under his weight. From the soil around him, thin streams of ash began to rise, circling him like smoke drawn to flame. They wrapped around his arms, his neck, his face, warm, almost tender. Greater than, breathe, keeper. The voice whispered, let the mountain live through you. He tried to resist, to push it away, but his body no longer obeyed. The ash seeped into his pores, his eyes, his mouth. It filled him, not choking, but consuming, remaking. The pain came slowly, not sharp but deep, spreading through every vein. He felt his skin tighten, heard the faint creak of his own bones as if they were wood drying in fire. His vision blurred, the world tilted. When the trembling stopped, he was no longer sure where his body ended and the mountain began. He stood, unsteady. His breath came in long, slow draws, matching the rhythm of the earth's own exhalation. The air around him shimmered, rippling like heat. When he spoke, his words carried echoes, low, ancient, not his. Greater than, I am Lamb, he said, and I am not. The valley answered with silence. He turned toward the path that led upward, where the mountain's throat split into mist. The air there glowed faintly, the same red as the ash beneath his skin. As he began to climb, his footprints burned softly in the dirt, leaving no trace of ash behind, only small, dark hollows that pulsed once, like open eyes watching him go. Chapter 8. The Blood Ritual. Gi La Mao. By the time Lamb reached the mountain's throat, The sky had turned the color of ash and rust. The clouds above did not move, they pulsed, as though something vast was breathing behind them. The air smelled faintly of copper and rain. He climbed until the earth gave way to stone. There, carved into the mountain's heart, was a hollow circle of black rock, the sanctum of breath, where the first keeper was said to have spoken with the spirit of the earth. The walls shimmered faintly with veins of red light, moving like slow blood beneath the surface. At the center stood a stone altar, half buried in ash. Upon it rested a bowl carved from bone, cracked with age but unbroken. Lamb approached in silence. The mountain's hum surrounded him, low and steady. He could feel its rhythm under his feet, through his chest, behind his eyes. It was no longer a sound but a presence, a pulse echoing through every grain of ash in the valley. He placed both hands upon the altar. The stone was warm, breathing. The bowl trembled faintly as his touch met it. "Greater than, you called me to close what was opened," Lamb whispered. "Show me the way." The hum deepened. The red veins on the wall brightened, then began to flow inward, converging toward the altar. The air thickened with the smell of iron and smoke. "Greater than, there is no closing," the mountain's voice replied. Neither male nor female, not even sound but vibration in his bones. Only balance. The living must give what the dead cannot. Lamb bowed his head. His shadow stretched across the stone, bending with the flicker of unseen fire. He did not see where the knife came from, it was simply there, resting upon the altar as though it had waited for centuries. The blade was dull, dark, its edge whispering faintly like breath through reeds. He lifted it. The weight was neither heavy nor light, it felt like something remembered. "Greater than, if blood began it," he said, "then blood shall end it." He pressed the blade to his palm, but before it touched skin, the mountain stopped him. "Greater than, not the hand," it said, "the heart." Lamb's breath caught. For a moment, fear flickered through him, small, human, bright, then it was gone, replaced by calm so vast it felt like silence itself. He turned the blade and placed its flat edge against his chest, over the faint mark that still glowed beneath his skin. "Greater than, this body is the seal." The voice continued. "Let its breath return to the soil." Lamb exhaled slowly. The hum rose in pitch, trembling the air, the stone, his bones. He did not cut, he only pressed, and as he did, the light beneath his skin spread outward, blooming like roots through flesh. The veins of red light leapt from the walls, winding toward him, merging with the glow that now enveloped his body. The air grew dense, luminous. Dust floated upward, suspended like stars. The bowl on the altar filled, not with blood, but with light, deep crimson fading to gold. The mountain's heartbeat grew louder. Each thud echoed through the cavern, shaking ash from the ceiling, rippling the ground. Lamb closed his eyes. The warmth coursed through him, from his heart to his fingertips, to the soles of his feet, then into the earth below. He whispered a final prayer. "Greater than, let the land rest. Let the dead sleep. Let the keeper fade." The mountain answered with one long, trembling breath. The red light surged, then dimmed. The air cooled. The hum dissolved into stillness. When Lamb opened his eyes, the bowl was empty. His reflection on the bone surface was faint, almost transparent. He looked down at his hands. The veins of ash beneath his skin no longer moved. He stepped back from the altar. The cavern was silent, save for the soft sigh of wind entering through unseen cracks. Outside, the clouds began to move again. The first drop of rain in weeks touched the earth, hissing softly as it met the ash. Lamb turned toward the valley. From here he could see it spread beneath him, gray, endless, quiet. The mist was gone. The earth no longer pulsed. The mountain was still. He understood then that the ritual was complete, not in death, but in surrender. The mountain no longer needed his breath. And as he stepped down from the altar, the rain began to fall in earnest, soft, cleansing, red at first, then clear. Chapter 9: The Bell Beneath the Earth. Ting Chuang Doi Long Dat. The rain did not stop for 3 days. It fell softly, evenly, washing the ash from the valley and carrying it down into the rivers that had long since dried. The water turned gray, then clear, running once more through the ribs of the mountain. Lamb sat at the foot of the ancestral stone, unmoving, His breath was shallow but steady. His body cold yet unbroken. The glow beneath his skin had faded, leaving only pale traces of silver where the ash had once pulsed. He listened. The mountain was quiet now. The deep hum that had filled every silence was gone. In its place was something gentler, a faint resonance that seemed to rise from within the stone itself. It was not sound but vibration, the memory of a sound, like the echo of a bell that had been struck long ago and never quite stopped ringing. Lamb pressed his hand to the ground. The vibration met his pulse, soft and rhythmic. It was the same note, the same tone, repeating again and again, until it began to feel like breath, like life returning. The air carried the scent of wet soil and moss. The trees at the edge of the clearing had begun to green again, their leaves dripped with rain, reflecting a dim light that seemed to come from nowhere. He rose slowly. His knees trembled from days without food or rest. The world around him shimmered faintly, washed clean but fragile, like paper left too long in water. And then he heard it clearly for the first time. Greater than the bell. It was deep, low, impossibly far and near at once. The sound rose from beneath the earth, muffled yet pure, as though the mountain itself had grown hollow and someone had struck its heart. Each tone lingered long after it was born, curling through the mist, finding its way into the folds of the rain. Lamb closed his eyes. The sound was neither mournful nor joyful, it was both. It carried memory, the echo of names, of footsteps, of prayers whispered into the soil. It carried the breath of the dead and the silence of those who had forgotten. He knelt again, touching his forehead to the damp earth. Greater than, it is done, he whispered. Sleep now. The bell rang once more. Softer this time, the sound passed through him, leaving warmth in its wake. The rain thinned to a drizzle. The fog lifted from the valley, revealing terraces of dark, gleaming earth ready to live again. The ancestral stone no longer glowed. It was only stone now, cold and still, half buried beneath the soil it had once ruled. But when the wind shifted, Lamb thought he could still hear the faintest chime deep below, like a pulse, or a breath, or the memory of both. He stood and looked down the slope. The valley stretched wide and quiet beneath the pale sky. No voices called, no shadows moved, only the rain fell, washing the last traces of ash from his feet. As he began his descent, the bell rang once more, clear, distant, final. Lamb did not look back. The mountain exhaled, and the world was still. Chapter 10. Beneath the Ash Tree. Doi koi ke tro. The rain ceased at dawn. Mist rose from the valley floor, soft and white, drifting upward like the breath of the earth itself. Where the ashes had once choked the soil, new shoots of grass now trembled in the weak light. Lamb walked barefoot through the damp field. The earth was warm beneath his feet, alive once more. His footsteps sank gently into the soil, leaving no trace of ash, only dark patches where water pooled and reflected the pale sky. He followed the path toward the oldest part of the forest, where roots ran deep and silence carried weight. The air there was still, heavy with the scent of rain-soaked bark and new growth. At the heart of the grove stood a single tree, tall and pale, its branches bare though the world around it bloomed. Its trunk shimmered faintly with silver veins, as if the light of the moon had seeped into its skin. Around its base lay a ring of blackened soil, soft as powder, faintly warm to the touch. Lamb stopped before it. He knew this place. It was where the first fire had burned. He knelt and pressed his hand to the ground. The warmth that met his palm was gentle, familiar. Beneath the surface, something stirred, not restless, but breathing. Greater than, I have returned, he said softly. The tree gave no answer. Yet the air shifted. A breeze passed through the clearing, stirring the pale branches so they whispered against one another. The sound was faint, like the murmuring of distant voices. Lamb closed his eyes. For a moment, he felt weightless, neither here nor gone, neither body nor spirit. The pulse within him, once heavy and foreign, was fading, replaced by something slower, broader, belonging to the ground itself. He thought of the villagers, of old men, of the mountain. He thought of the breath that bound all things, the same breath that now moved through soil, through roots, through rain. He understood, then, that the ash had never been death. It was memory. He dug his fingers into the dark soil, letting it fill the lines of his hands. The warmth crept up his arms, through his chest, to his throat. His heartbeat slowed until it matched the rhythm of the ground, deep, steady, eternal. Above him, the tree's bark shifted. Small buds unfurled along the branches, trembling with drops of rain. Each bud glowed faintly, the color of ember and dawn. Lamb smiled, a quiet, tired smile. He lay down beneath the tree, his back against the warm soil. The sky above was a pale silver bowl. He watched the mist rise through the branches, swirling into the light until both became the same. The wind sighed once more, and the roots of the tree sank deeper. When the villagers later returned to Pa Lung, they found the valley green and silent. At its heart stood the pale ash tree, taller than any they remembered. Beneath it, where the ground curved gently inward, the soil was warm, and there was no trace of footprints. Only the faint sound of breathing, like a man asleep beneath the earth. Chapter 11. The Realm of the Dead opens. Koi M Mo Kua. Night fell softly over Pa Lung. The sky was vast and empty, a sheet of pale gray stretching over the valley. No stars, no moon, only the slow shimmer of clouds drifting like the breath of something sleeping. The ash tree stood still at the valley's heart. Its branches glowed faintly, holding the last traces of twilight in their thin, silver bark. Beneath it lay Lamb, motionless, his body half buried in the warm soil. The wind had stopped. The air was perfectly still, the kind of silence that is so full it hums. Somewhere deep beneath the ground, the faint sound of water moved through stone, slow and steady, like a distant heartbeat. Then it began. A tremor ran through the earth, soft, gentle, like an exhale. The tree shivered, its roots deepened, and from the cracks in the soil, pale light began to seep upward, tracing veins across the land. The light spread in thin lines, connecting the stones, the fields, the riverbeds, forming a web of soft gold that pulsed with life. Lamb opened his eyes. He was no longer certain if he was awake. The world around him seemed thinner, more transparent. The air glowed softly, and within it drifted shapes, vague, human, shimmering like smoke in sunlight. They moved slowly, weightlessly, as if wading through water. Each one carried a faint light within its chest, flickering like a candle in wind. He recognized them, the faces of the villagers, the elders, the lost, the forgotten. Their expressions were calm. There was no fear in their eyes, only quiet knowing. They did not speak, yet their presence filled the air with meaning. Lamb felt it in his chest, in the rhythm of his breath, a message without words. Greater than the gate is open. The light rising from the earth gathered at the foot of the ash tree, swirling into a single column of gold and silver. The air shimmered. Within the column, Lamb saw movement, shadows passing through, one by one, dissolving into the light. The boundary between the living and the dead was gone. There was no door now, only a threshold made of breath and memory. Lamb sat up slowly. His hands sank into the soil, and warmth spread through his palms. The earth was no longer heavy, it felt soft, kind, greater than. So this is what it means, he murmured, to return. The ash tree's branches swayed though there was no wind. Its leaves whispered faintly, and Lamb thought he could hear the echo of voices, thousands of them, layered together, soft as a song. He looked upward. The sky above was not the sky he knew. It was deeper, endless, filled with moving light. Between those lights, he saw figures rising, merging with the glow, fading like sparks drifting into dawn. He felt no fear, no grief, only stillness. He closed his eyes. The hum beneath the ground grew stronger, spreading through his body until his heartbeat and the earth's pulse became one. A single note rang out, low, pure, eternal. It was the sound of the world remembering itself. The air brightened. The valley shone like glass beneath morning sun. Then, slowly, the light began to fade, settling into soil and stone, into roots and water. When silence returned, Lamb was gone. Only the ash tree remained, its bark glistening faintly with morning dew, its branches heavy with new leaves. And from deep beneath its roots came one final whisper, softer than breath, greater than. All gates open only to close again. Chapter 12. Beneath the final mist. Doi lop suong mu kuoi kung. At dawn, the valley of Pa Lung breathed again. The night's tremors had stilled, the earth lay quiet, damp, and heavy with the scent of rain. The mist that had once choked the land returned, not the gray veil of decay, but a soft, pale shimmer that clung to the trees like a thin layer of glass. No one knew how long the silence lasted. The villagers came down from the higher slopes, hesitant, walking on ground that seemed reborn yet fragile. The air was cool, filled with the murmur of water beneath the soil. Where the ash tree stood, the land curved gently inward, forming a shallow hollow. Its trunk rose pale and straight, its roots half buried in earth still dark from the rain. The leaves were silver, and when the wind moved through them, they made a sound like breathing, slow, calm, endless. The villagers stopped at the edge of the hollow. None dared to approach. For a long time, no one spoke. They could feel something in the air, a warmth that was not sunlight, a stillness that was not silence. Some thought it was peace, others, the lingering presence of the dead. Then the mist thickened. It rolled down from the cliffs and spread across the valley floor, curling around the roots of the ash tree. In its folds, faint lights flickered, soft, golden, like candles drifting in water. The villagers watched as the lights rose and fell, weaving through the mist in slow circles. Each one pulsed once, twice, and faded. And for a moment, they heard it, the echo of a voice, distant, carried by wind and rain. Greater than sleep, the land remembers. No one knew whose voice it was. Some said it was Lamb's. Others said it was the mountain itself speaking through the mist. But after that day, the people of Pa Lung never spoke the old prayers again. They no longer burned incense for the spirits of the earth, nor called to the ancestors by name. Instead, they left offerings of rice and salt beneath the ash tree, silent gifts, given without ceremony. Seasons passed, the rains returned, the soil grew rich, children played among the terraces, and none of them knew why the ground beneath their feet was warm even in winter, or why the wind that came down from the mountain always carried the faint scent of smoke and iron. And sometimes, when the valley was covered by mist, those who listened closely could hear it again, a faint, rhythmic sound beneath the earth. Not thunder, not water, but breathing. Chapter 13 The Nether Realm. Koi Am. Lam awoke in silence. There was no air, no wind, no sense of weight, only stillness, vast, endless, and soft as ash. The ground beneath him felt neither solid nor hollow, but something in between, like walking on the skin of a drum stretched over emptiness. He rose slowly. The light around him was colorless, dim and unbroken, yet he could see everything, the folds of fog, the faint outline of mountains beyond, the shimmer of what might have been a river, though it did not move. When he looked down, his feet left no marks. His body cast no shadow. The silence pressed against his chest, not cruelly, but firmly, like a hand reminding him he did not belong here. He called out once. His voice did not echo, it dissolved before reaching the air. Greater than so, this is the other side, he thought. The space before him shifted. The fog deepened, then parted, revealing a path of pale stones that glowed faintly from within. It wound upward, into a sky that had no color and no direction. He began to walk. Each step felt both heavy and hollow, as if his body were made of sound rather than flesh. Beneath the stones, faint vibrations pulsed, a rhythm, a heartbeat not his own. The air carried no warmth, no cold, only memory. Shapes drifted at the edges of the path, forms without faces, moving like shadows underwater. They turned as he passed, but did not come closer. Their outlines flickered between human and smoke, sometimes scattering into dust before reforming again. Lam lowered his gaze and kept walking. After a time that could have been hours or centuries, the path widened. Before him stood a gate, tall and seamless, carved from what looked like translucent stone. Upon it were engraved countless markings, circles, lines, and symbols that pulsed faintly like embers under skin. The air here trembled with silence so deep it made his bones ring. Lam approached and placed his hand upon the gate. The surface was cool and smooth, but beneath it, he felt movement, something slow and immense, like the turning of the earth. A whisper rose, not from behind the gate, but from within himself. Greater than, "Do you remember why you came?" He closed his eyes. Memory came like fragments of light, fire, rain, the ash tree, the sound of breathing beneath the ground. Greater than, to seal what I opened. He answered. The whisper paused. Then, greater than, and if sealing means silence? Greater than, then let silence be my name. The markings on the gate brightened. The surface shivered beneath his hand. And a sound, low, pure, infinite, filled the air. It was not a voice, nor a word, but the tone of a bell struck without end. The gate began to open. Light spilled out, not bright, but soft and white, like the glow beneath deep snow. Within it, he saw shapes moving, slow, graceful, unhurried. They were not alive, nor dead, they simply were. Lamb stepped forward. The light enveloped him, and the world behind dissolved. For an instant, he felt himself falling, not down, not up, but inward. The silence deepened until it became sound again, the low hum of the world's first breath. And then he was standing once more, on a plain of silver dust, beneath a sky that had never known day or night. Far in the distance, a faint glow pulsed, slow and steady, like a heart beneath stone. Lamb began to walk toward it. Chapter 14 The Silent Gate. Kua Kam. The light faded as Lamb stepped through the gate. Silence fell, not the silence of night or sleep, but something far heavier, older. It was the silence that existed before the first word, before the first breath. It filled every space, seeped into every fold of thought, until even the act of remembering felt too loud. Lamb stopped walking. The ground beneath him was neither stone nor dust but a smooth, gray surface that shimmered faintly like water in moonlight. There was no horizon, no air, no wind. Even his heartbeat had gone still. He opened his mouth to speak, but the words did not come. Not because the air refused them, but because language itself no longer existed here. A faint light pulsed in the distance, no brighter than the ember of dying incense. It flickered once, twice, then steadied. Drawn to it, Lamb began to move. His steps made no sound. His body seemed weightless, and yet each movement sent ripples through the air, as if he were walking through a sea of silence made visible. The light grew larger. It was not a flame, but a small sphere suspended in the air, white, smooth, and beating softly like a heart. Around it drifted fragments of memory, translucent and slow, faces, gestures, half-remembered moments. When Lamb passed through them, they scattered like dust. He reached out, letting his fingers graze the sphere. A pulse of warmth spread up his arm and into his chest. For the first time since crossing the gate, he felt something close to sound, a vibration deep within his bones. Faint but real, it was the rhythm of his own breath returning, fragile and uncertain. Then came the first whisper. It did not break the silence, it was the silence speaking. Greater than, do not listen. Lamb froze. The words were not heard but felt, a weight settling behind his eyes. Greater than, do not name what lives here. Naming wakes it. He withdrew his hand. The light pulsed once, as if breathing. Around him, the gray surface rippled. Figures began to rise from it, pale, translucent, their forms wavering as if carved from mist. They had no faces, no mouths, only the faint impression of eyes that reflected nothing. They surrounded him, unmoving. Lamb did not feel fear, only the vast, pressing weight of quiet. One of the figures lifted its head. From the place where its mouth should have been, light spilled out, shaping words without sound. Greater than, the silent gate opens for those who can bear silence. Lamb bowed his head. He understood. He closed his eyes, letting go of breath, of thought, of name. The silence deepened, folding around him like water. At first, there was nothing. Then, within that nothing, something shifted. A single note rang out, pure and clear, like a bell heard underwater. The figures faded. The gray world trembled. The gate behind him dissolved into mist. Lamb stood alone. He could feel the silence pressing against his skin, pressing through it, until he no longer knew where his body ended. The boundary between himself and the air, between sound and stillness, between thought and nothingness, blurred, then vanished. He opened his eyes. The world was gone. Only light remained, endless, unbroken, pulsing like the breath of a sleeping god. In that light, he He heard, not with ears, but with every part of himself, a final whisper. Greater than, you have crossed the silence. You may now hear the heart beneath it. And then, once more, the silence returned. Complete, perfect, and infinite. Chapter 15 The Soul Boundary. Ket Joy Lin Hun. Beyond the silent gate, there was no path, no ground, no sky, only light that breathed. It was not bright, not blinding, but gentle and steady, as though the world itself had turned to mist and was remembering how to exist. Lam stood in the center of that vast, colorless space. Around him, the air shimmered faintly, and within its shifting folds, shadows began to take form, hundreds of them, each faint as a reflection in still water. They were the souls of Pa Lung. They did not cry, nor move, nor speak. They simply waited. Their faces were calm, their eyes half closed, as if listening to something distant but familiar. From the heart of the light came a sound, not a voice, but the echo of one. It was deep, slow, and layered, like the sound of wind moving through stone. Greater than, the keeper has come. The shadows bowed. Lam lifted his gaze. Before him rose a column of light that reached beyond sight. Within it shimmered a figure, vast, serene, formed of smoke and dawn. It was the primordial mother, the spirit of the first fire, the breath that once bound earth to sky. Her presence filled the space, yet there was no fear in it, only gravity, like the weight of truth. Greater than, you opened the breath, she said, her voice carrying through light and bone alike. Now you must close it. Lam bowed his head. How? Greater than, through silence. Greater than, I have crossed silence. Greater than, then through self. The words sank into him like stone into water. For a moment, he thought he understood, and in that moment, his body began to glow. The faint threads of light beneath his skin stirred, winding outward like roots seeking soil. The souls surrounding him rose slightly, their forms brightening. A soft hum filled the space, the same tone that had followed him through every gate, every dream. Greater than, if the mountain needs a seal, Lam said quietly, then let me be that seal. Greater than, you will not return. Greater than, the keeper's path has no return. The primordial mother extended her hand. Between her fingers shimmered a flame the color of dawn, soft, pale, without heat. It drifted toward Lam and entered his chest without pain. He gasped, not in fear but in recognition. The warmth spread through him, filling every hollow, every silence. His heartbeat, long forgotten, returned, slow and steady, matching the pulse of the mountain. All around, the light deepened, turning from white to gold, from gold to red. The souls of Pa Lung lifted their heads. The hum became song, not in words, but in the rhythm of breath, of earth, of wind. Lam stepped forward into the column of light. As he did, the ground, or what passed for ground, opened beneath him, revealing a chasm of swirling ash and flame. Yet the fire did not burn, it breathed, rising and falling like a sleeping giant. He closed his eyes. Greater than, blood began it. He whispered, let breath end it. He spread his arms. The light from his chest blazed outward, weaving through the air like threads of fire. They stretched toward the souls, binding one to another, linking them all into a vast, living circle. The primordial mother raised her hand, and the song ceased. Greater than, it is done. The column of light flared once bright, pure, final. In that instant, the valley of Pa Lung awoke. The ground stilled, the trees bowed, the rivers began to flow again, and from the mountain came a single sound, soft and resonant, the tone of a bell struck within stone, carrying through soil and root and breath. When the light faded, the space was empty. The souls had gone, the mother had vanished. Only Lam remained, though not as man, nor spirit, nor dust. Where he had stood now glowed a circle of light, faint and steady, pulsing in time with the earth itself. Around it, the ash settled, hardening into a smooth ring of black stone. Upon its surface, 3 circles were carved, each glowing faintly, each breathing. The soul boundary was complete. And when the wind passed through the valley that night, it carried a whisper so soft it seemed only a thought. Greater than, rest now. The breath is whole. They say that deep within the mountain, beneath the roots of the ash tree, A faint pulse still echoes, slow, steady, and warm. No one knows if it is the heart of the earth, or the breath of the man who sealed it. When the mist returns each year, drifting down from the cliffs at dusk, the villagers of Pa Lung fall silent. They listen. And sometimes, if the wind is kind, they swear they can hear it again, a single, distant breath beneath the soil.
Like and subscribe to Whispering Dark Tales for more chilling ghost stories.